Did you know that your actions and decisions during a job search can have far-reaching consequences and can, in some instances, impact other people? Also, unethical decisions made while in the job hunting process can come back to haunt you by raising a red flag to potential employers. By taking time to weigh your options and by using ethics in your entire job search process, you can maintain your integrity and make informed employment decisions. A recent survey found that the most common lies found on resumes included incorrect employment dates, inflated or inaccurate job titles, incomplete or inflated degrees, inflated salary histories, and inflated accomplishments, abilities, or jobs and duties. Some of these lies were simple mistakes made by the applicant, but in the eyes of the employer, they have been indicative of an applicant's intent to mislead or misrepresent. Do you know the actual titles of the jobs you held in the past? Did you obtain a degree or did you work toward one? Do you know your dates of employment with each individual employer? At the very least, you should be able to answer these questions truthfully and succinctly. There are many ethical choice scenarios in job searching. Following are a few examples. Examine each of these scenarios carefully. Think about what you would do in the same situation. Do you agree with the comments? You are getting concerned because you haven't received a call from any employers in a while. Today, employer A calls you and tells you that they are very interested in having you come in for an interview, and they ask to schedule one. You decide to go ahead and schedule an interview to practice your interview skills, even though you really do not want to work for employer A because they have a bad reputation. Forget what you may have heard about taking interviews for practice. This is unforgivable. Employers have to set aside valuable time in order to interview, and if you have absolutely no interest in working for the company, then you should not interview there. How have you determined that the company has a bad reputation? In any event, you might be taking a slot that someone who genuinely has an interest in working for the company might take. You make an interview appointment with employer B at 11 a.m. And then an old friend you haven't seen in a while calls you and invites you to brunch at the same time you have scheduled the interview. You get really excited, decide to meet the friend, post your date with the friend on Facebook or Twitter, and forget to call the employer to let them know you will not make it to the interview. Or you suddenly remember your date with the employer and call at 10:45 a.m. the day of the interview and tell them you are ill and ask to reschedule the interview. Making an appointment for an interview and then not showing up for the interview demonstrates a lack of class and character, unless it is for a legitimate and unforeseen reason. Once again, employers set aside valuable time in order to interview job candidates. You might also want to remember that many employers use Facebook to learn about job candidates, and it is easier than you think for an employer to see your postings on social media sites than ever before. Based upon the job announcement on a job search site you are using, you read that employer C wants someone with 2 years of experience in administrative, and you have 1 year. You are desperate for a job, so you decide to increase your experience on your resume to meet the employer's expectations. Then you submit it, and they call you for an interview. If you will lie on your resume, what else will you lie about? That is what employers think. One lie can cost you dearly. The purpose of writing a resume is to tell the employer what you can do and not misrepresent your talents and abilities. What if you get hired and can't perform the duties you said you could perform? Remember, the employment community is smaller than you think, and employers communicate with each other through organizations and other means. Ever hear the term blackball? The resume's sole purpose is to obtain an interview for its writer. It doesn't get the job for its writer. Rather than misrepresent your skills, you can assure the employer on your resume that you are a quick learner and adaptable. This will help you overcome some of those less than perfect abilities. You had an interview with employer D last week, and they said they would call you. You really liked them and hoped they would call you on Friday. They didn't call, so you arranged an interview with employer E. The interview went well and employer E offered you the position and you accepted it. Upon your acceptance, they sent you for a physical, drug screening, and had you complete your background check information. Several days later, employer D calls and makes you a job offer. You accept employer D's offer because you really wanted that position in the first place. You should not tell an employer that you are going to take a position unless you plan to take it. This is why you should ask for time to consider the offer. Most companies appreciate less impulsive acceptances, and this would give you time to contact any companies that you may have been waiting to hear from. Additionally, letting the other company or companies know that you have been given a job offer may favorably expedite their decision to hire you. In every instance, retracting acceptance of a job offer is the ultimate breach of integrity. Once you have made the decision to take the position, you should stick to it. In this case, the employer has also spent company funds to do the final screening to place you in the job. If you do not take the position, the company is also faced with the possibility of repeating the expensive hiring process. You were fired from employer E and drew unemployment for several months. You revamped your resume and decided to omit employer E because you left on really bad terms, had a serious disagreement with your former boss, and you don't want them to badmouth you to a potential employer because you really need a job. In today's super electronic social media crazed age, an employer can find out if and when you work for an employer, the date you worked for the employer, and if you drew unemployment. Human resource savvy former employers also know that they can and should only provide specific information, which is the date of hire, the date of termination, and eligibility for rehire. Unfortunately, there are employers who will go beyond the acceptable, and that is a chance you have to take. Once again, the truth is better than the alternative. You asked a former employer to write you a letter of recommendation, and he agreed to. However, you have not received it, cannot make contact with the employer, and have a job interview to attend that requires you to bring 3 letters of reference. Since your interview is today, you create a pseudo letter for the employer and add it to the 2 letters you already had from other employers, determining that you will replace the one you created later on with the one the employer actually writes. You also believe it is acceptable since the employer verbally agreed to write one for you. Yet again, lying and misrepresenting is completely unacceptable. In this case, it also goes into the area of falsification as a possible criminal act. You are better off taking the 2 genuine letters of recommendations with you to the interview. If asked, you can offer to provide the third employer's full name and contact number in order to reinforce your belief of their willingness to support your employment efforts with a verbal as well as a written recommendation. A job search takes you into many different areas of the decision-making process. Many people are uninformed of their ethical options and are inclined to act or react thoughtlessly, failing to realize the full implications of their behavior. Ethical decisions, good and bad, made by job hunters can also reflect on recruiters, interviewers, employers, and others in the employment process. As in every aspect of your everyday life, you should make informed, wise choices while using ethics in your decision-making process. If you do, you will find your employment future will be a positive one.